Metalheads UK and all that stuff. Right now you're checking out Full Frequency, RTR, blowing it up.
Welcome back to Full Frequency. Time now, just going to click over to 319. It's a beautiful afternoon here in Borloo. Hope you're doing something nice. I'm here in the studio, which is where I like to be. I've got Dolphins on Mars underneath me, two in fact. This is a dub by Citizens of Earth. Big ups to Just James for sending me this one. I don't know when it's coming out, so maybe forthcoming. I'll have to ask him, but yeah, I've got some beautiful cascading drum rolls in this one. Really feeling it. Before that, Greed and Prejudice by Vince Rollin. A 2020 hardcore tune on 36 Hertz Records from the UK. By Train Spotters amongst you would have heard the Respace, heavily used in there, and yeah, a few Med Townsends as well. Yeah,
just going to wait till this guy finishes talking.
Coming up next, got a bit of Neck Tax for you. He's got a gig coming up on, I think it's like the 6th of February. I'll give you the details later in the show. But yeah, go check that one out. Down at 201. He's making big waves in the jungle scene at the moment. We've got a few more 160s coming your way. Out of the crate, got some Overshadow coming shortly. Remember, you can send me a signal 0405 921 921 studio@rtrfm.com.au. This is JC looking after the Wednesday Full Frequency for Weaponists. Big ups, everyone that's logged in.
Yeah, big ups in it.
Let's do this.
Big ups all you junglers crew inside the ride. We're gonna do some rolling beats in it or something. Alright, so this is the tri-weekly Dumplat broadcast here on a very balmy summer's day. It is still warm outside despite the fact that it's 9 PM. The aircon is at full ball. Trying to keep ourselves cool. So I hope you enjoy today's non-interactive lecture. delivered to you by a moody Egyptian. As I probably just stand on the deck of my ship in Helldivers. In here is what I'm trying to do. Bit of professional reaming. Alright, there we go. So, at the invitation of the Australian Labor Party, Isaac Herzog will be coming here, will be arriving on the 7th of February to address a, I think it's a kind of Bondi memorial, because, you know, God knows we should never stop mourning this 15 people who were killed on that day by, weirdly, a couple of Indian people who were affiliated to ISIS. Not the kind of thing you'd expect if you're paying attention in any way to the dynamics of various Middle East extremist groups. But, you know, one will never be able to prove this unless there's a leak somewhere in the investigation, which in Australia is unlikely. During the last couple of guys who've leaked stuff like this have gone straight to jail. We're probably, you know, it's probably no secret to you. You could probably guess that I'm not convinced about the Bondi attack. I mean, obviously it happened, but the circumstances that surround it, I will never be convinced. It just not pass the smell test for me. But, you know, putting all that aside, we're having a war criminal invited here by a ostensibly centre-left party to you know, memorialize the deaths of, you know, there were some innocent people in there, I'm sure. And in doing so, also a backhanded spitting on the graves of somewhere between 100 to 500,000 dead Palestinians, whose deaths are not at all worth acknowledging by any country in the West, least of all Australia. I mean, you know, Spain, Ireland, sure. Good on them. Good on them. The good Germans was the term. The good Europeans.
Week, where we investigate only the finest scams in Australian business and politics. And what a year it will be, 2026. So let's dive straight in. We had our first Australian arrested under the new hate speech laws. Arrested and plonked in jail for...
Yeah, this is Theo. Theo and I speak online. This guy had a bomb put on his car for flying a Palestinian flag. I think that dude who did it had some kind of piss week, a suspended sentence. But because he said something, like, online, he's been arrested now. Because saying stuff online is way worse than having a bomb planted on your car, as we all know. As long as, you know, if you're a default brown, which he is now, being a pro-Palestine guy, your life is, of course, not worth shit in this country.
Tweet. Yes, a joking tweet.
It may even be less worth than shit. Because Australians love gardening. They love to garden. And, you know, you have to buy that shit.
Tweet. For a joke. Plonked in jail. Hate speech, that old hate speech. They don't care if you're joking, those hate speech laws. They're making an example of
Also, I'm cooking pasta, so I will be in and out. Because I have to check on that.
people. And while the Libs, the Liberal Party and the Coalition are in eternal Libspill mode, plotting against their leader Susan Lee, that sort of dominated a little bit. Albo and Co look like they're sleepwalking into the next global war if the US invades Iran, which could have which might happen before we publish this video, or it may happen sometime in the next week, because the troops are massing around Iran and Israel is pushing the Donald all the way for an assault on Iran. Forgetting nuclear weapons, being just months away from getting nuclear weapons, as Iran has been for 25 years, just months away, maybe days or weeks from getting nuclear weapons and ICBMs where they can target the US. Of course, Iran hasn't invaded anybody, and Israel and America invade dozens of people every couple of years. But that's where we are. What will Australia do? Will we offer support, grovelling platitudes, logistical support through Pine Gap? We'll be there with them morally, because it's the moral thing to do, to change regimes for freedom and democracy and all that good stuff. Now, we're going to be brief this week for the first scam of the week in 2026. We're going to be very brief. Now, how's this for a chart? Because we're not going to see this dominate politics, because it's all going to be anti-Semitism and royal commissions and global wars and stuff like that. The cost of living, the thing which affects most ordinary Australians. Just check out this chart. The government spends more on tax breaks for wealthy private investors than it does on housing for ordinary Australians. And of course, as interest rates go up, which they look like they're just about to do, the bill's going to get higher, because more negative gearing, higher interest rates means a greater cost to the budget. Thank you, you wealthy property investors. Done good. Anyway, last year, as you can see from the chart, they dipped into our taxes to the tune, this is the wealthy property investors, the tune of 12.3 billion for investor tax breaks on housing versus 9.6 billion for housing for people that actually need a roof over their heads. There you have it. The gap is widening. It is getting worse. Now, the point of all this, what's the scam with all this? Well,
I should add that he's going to explain what the scam is from the Australian context. This is a land earning issue that permeates the West, really. Well, the English-speaking West, more specifically. We're entering a neo-feudalistic era, wherein anybody with a bit of money can daisy chain their equity by buying an investment property and then continuing to buy investment properties, and the rest of us can just fuck off and die. Work and die. That is the name of the game for the new middle class, the bourgeoisie, as the French called them. The top level neo-feudalism, of course, exists with the techno-feudalists in the form of that dude whom, the Palantir guy, I don't remember any names right now, where they're setting up essentially techno-feudalist states. I think one was in Honduras, and they're planning to do it in Greenland if the most American president of all time actually manages to acquire Greenland somehow.
the point of it is that we're in for another year of policy dithering, because that's where we are in the democratic evolution of modern democracy. The stasis in reform, where politics is polarised, lobby groups dominate. It's all about the money. And in fact, In a couple of days, we're going to have the political donations data. It's always very lagging, very late, very belated, but it will be for an election year, so that will be interesting. We'll have full coverage of that. I think it's on Monday. Now, the odds are that things like housing and cost of living, which is just about to go up thanks to the inflation data, which was pretty bad, but in the meantime, it's all about a man named Isaac. Yes, the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog. He's going on a tour of Australia. And as we tweeted this week, we hope that he gets a bigger reception than the Beatles themselves back in the 60s. We hope the crowds are cheering madly for Isaac, because of course Isaac is one of the world's most prominent unconvicted war criminals. Why did we bring him here? Well, it was a bit of a wedge. The scam was that the Zionist Federation of Australia invited him, and we couldn't have a foreign leader, a dignitary, just swanning in without giving him a state welcome. So Albo was wedged, and then he wedged the Governor-General, who'd had to make the proper invitation. The poor old Governor-General, Sam, gritting her teeth, smiling, invited Isaac to Australia formally. Meanwhile, back in Israel, he's busy, with the greatest slaughter of children in modern history. Unrivaled, unparalleled. And now, of course, they're plotting to install Donald Trump Riviera, to steal the land, to control it. No Palestinians on the board of peace. The board of peace, Donald's board of peace for the Trump Riviera. And this will run all week as Isaac visits. Now, the Australian Jewish Council, the Jewish Council of Australia rather, and ANEC, the nation's peak Muslim body, have come together with the Hind Rajab Foundation. Hind was the young girl who got shot with hundreds of bullets in the car in Gaza, just one of the 20,000 children murdered. And they've got together to file a criminal complaint against the Israeli President Isaac Herzog, a criminal complaint. And it's been lodged by the high-profile barrister Robert Richter, KC. Richter's a bit of a heavyweight, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Now, Richter has formally requested authorities issue and be prepared to execute an arrest warrant upon Herzog's arrival in Australian jurisdiction. Albo, if you're listening, why don't you just man up, Sonny Jim? Just man up and arrest the guy. You'd really make a name for yourself there. You would really stand out in modern history as a serious figure if you just arrest this war criminal, alleged war criminal, who's been found by the International Court of Justice, or is it the ICC? The ICC, I think, to have made incitement to genocide. The UN, that's their finding from our man Chris Sidoti, the Australian lawyer. So why don't you man up and arrest the bloke when he gets to Australia? Because we've got a massive double standard operating here at the moment in Australia. There was a bomb thrown into a crowd on Invasion Day, and the press labelled it as a scare, not as a terrorist incident. Why hasn't it been deemed to be a terrorist incident? It was clearly political. That's all you need for a terrorist incident. We hear the word terror bandied about a lot, but let's face it, if it's political violence or attempted political violence, it's terror. Then there's the first person to be plonked in jail. Good old Theo Nolan Isles. Theo, I know Theo because we broke the story in 2024 of Theo having a bomb placed on his car, an incendiary device, in suburban Maroubra. And they took 8 weeks to arrest the guy who was a Zionist, who was upset with Theo being a pro-Palestinian peace protester. And so they arrested him, and eventually he got some sort of slap over the wrist from that bomb or incendiary device, an inflammable thing, basically a crude sort of petrol bomb. And so somebody throws something on Invasion Day into the crowd, a similar sort of device. It doesn't go off. But of course, the double standard is that if you're a friend of the government, which is the Australia Day crew rather than the Invasion Day crew, it's not deemed to be terrorism. Likewise, the Zionists, likewise, Isaac Herzog. And so social media has been going wild, rightly, about this double standard, because terrorism is terrorism. And violence is violence. It shouldn't matter which creed or political ideology it derives from. Now, the Lib spill. Now, Pauline, over the break, has been shooting up in the polls, eclipsing the Libs, eclipsing the coalition vote. One Nation, no seats in the lower house, but she's polling in the 20s above the coalition. So this week, poor old Susan Lee, hapless Susan.
Yeah, so, I don't know if he's explained it. I'm looking after my pastor. Similar situation to the UK here. One Nation is... It's a 30-year-old party at this point, actually. Old Pauline Hanson has been around for some time. So One Nation, led by Pauline Hanson, that's the orange party here. The closest equivalent, actually, it's very similar to the UK situation where One Nation is kind of like, what is the name of that dude's party? Nigel Farage's party in the UK. Apparently they've overtaken our Conservative coalition, which is represented here by the Red, as the most popular alternative. How this translates, because our electoral system is a little bit different to the UK and very different to the United States. How this translates to lower house seats is, to be seen. And these numbers like this, polling done this early, I mean, we just had an election, I think, last year. Or we have like a couple of years at least until the next federal election happens. People's election preferences tend to crystallize much closer to the voting booth, if you know what I mean. People tend to freeze up and think, well, better go for the safe option. So, but it does seem at this point that our Conservative coalition, which is in the opposition, tentatively at this point, their numbers have sunk. I mean, all of this is interesting. It is a bit of a temperature gauge to see where the Australian public is. I think a lot of what's driving this is to do with, well, just your basic, bog standard, quiet racism, which most Australians will not ever admit to and will be very offended if you call that out. And I think a general kind of non-racist motivated opposition to immigration because of housing and housing prices. We do take in quite a lot of immigrants every year, like 400,000, I think. And we have way fewer houses available than that. So a lot of people just tend to have a general opposition to immigration, which I think it's fair to say is not based in racism. But the fact that a lot of Indian people come here doesn't really help that equation, if you know what I'm saying. So essentially, One Nation, what's Nigel Farage's party called again? What is it called? I'm not looking at chat. Reform, that's the one. So our Reform equivalent is polling quite highly at this point. So, hopefully in 6 months I'll be the fuck out of the West. For good. I don't actually even give a shit if if I die by the time I'm 50 or early 60s. It's worth it to get the fuck out of here.
This week, poor old Susan Lee, hapless Susan. Susan has a lot of people plotting against her. The Murdoch press.
Oh, what's up,
course,
Kairos?
She's too wet
What's
for
up,
the
Krail?
Murdoch press. She's not right-wing enough. She's a woman.
No, look at us. What's up, Chug? What's up, Gumbies? Nice to see you all. One Nation would be fascist if they were, like, half as smart as any traditional fascist party. They're just kind of dumb. They're dumb guy racists who kind of wish they were, like, half as organized as Reform, despite being, like, 10 times older at this point. This is, I mean, the stupidest people imaginable run for parliament under the One Nation banner. But, never underestimate the stupidity of the voting public. And I mean, I say that like I'm being a bit glib here. Like, I don't really mean to say the voting public is glib. The fact is that they're just frustrated. And the point is that both parties are never going to do anything about the cost of living crisis. They're never going to do anything about the housing issue, because it's just not one of their political imperatives. It's not one of the strategic imperatives of this entire country, actually. So people are frustrated. They want to fuck something up. It's the same phenomenon as what happened during Brexit. The same phenomenon as what caused people to vote for Trump. It's the same shit.
Which doesn't help. And so there we had this week Angus Taylor and Andrew Hastie plotting together, having a secret talk. They were busted. A secret talk on how best and when and who should knife Susan Lee. It will go on all year. They are in the political wilderness, in political Siberia, and so that will make for constant news who's going to take over the Liberal Party. Just a matter of time. Maybe they should all just merge with Trumpet of Patriots and be done with it, Clive. Now, TikTok in the US got crushed this week because it was taken over by Larry Ellison, the Oracle guy, who's a massive Zionist. And immediately, when TikTok was taken over, they just censored all Epstein content because they don't want that Epstein stuff coming to light. They're still redacted, still refusing, despite a congressional vote that they have to release the files. They're still hiding those, ergo the Iran distraction. But TikTok just absolutely was trashed in the US. And meanwhile, an app called Upscroll...
Gumby, I have not seen you in a minute. How are you? Are you okay? Are you doing well?
Dozens of his family members in Gaza.
Putting together my seed order for the year. Anybody has got pluses just this window. You should talk to Gumby for that. Oh, David's music really driving the point, yeah.
And he's played...
I can't do I keep meaning to play games in, like, the gaming window, but I can't, like, I have a very one-track mind. I can't think about two things at once, really.
That there's going to be no algo. It is truly free
I've
speech,
timed out of the game.
You cannot get crunched for anti-Israel, anti-Donald Trump, anti-Epstein, any of this kind of stuff that is so sensitive in the US, because censorship is going to be huge this year. We feel it here. We feel it on TikTok. We feel it much more on Instagram and Facebook. Facey, that's the worst. And Elon Musk is busy
turn the volume down.
using his algo to silence critics of America and Israel and Epstein file stuff. So Elon, while better than most, is still bad, still a hypocrite on free speech. He's literally banning pro-Palestinian accounts, shadow banning them first and then sometimes just outright banning them. Anybody that mentions Epstein or Israel's behaviour or the Donald in negative terms. So Upscrolled, the new app by the Palestinian Australian guy, has been going crackers all week. Who knows? It may work.
Oh yeah, join Upscroll, by the way. I've got to say that the zeitgeisty kind of, I'm talking about the documentary Zeitgeist, if you've never seen it. It's essentially about the Dukinist strategy of like confusing people, mass confusion of the general populace, like not knowing really what's real. So in the age of AI, in the age of disinformation, which we're experiencing, it's difficult to know what is real and what isn't. So I've become paranoid about apps like Upscrolled. It's founded by a Palestinian, Jordanian, Australian guy. Quite a slick platform. No advertising. Sounds really good. But the fact that it sounds really good is what makes me a little bit suspicious. So I found it very difficult to find information about the guy himself who is behind Upscrolled. But, that said, I could very well be wrong. My paranoia might be completely misplaced. I've created an account on there. So for the time being, I mean, it doesn't really ask you for any personal information yet, but that said, it does do the app permissions thing on your phone. So just be aware, tentatively join. You probably won't be censored on Upscrolled, at least not for most geopolitical topics. Apparently, Jaina told me that a lot of trans people have been brigaded and banned because of the brigading, not necessarily because of the platform per se. So, I hadn't heard about that before she told me. But, so, I guess bear that in mind.
In any case, it is truly a free marketplace, which is good, the internet, because anybody can start up a website. And if it all turns to dust, you can always just go to michaelwest.com.au or this YouTube channel before we get dragged through the courts or busted for hate speech or something. Due to the usual vested interests, we expect that there'll be something coming this year. And so you can always go to the website in the meantime if everything else gets crunched by the people that used to call themselves free speech advocates. Now, RBA inflation, 3.6% is the highest number, came out this week in 6 quarters or 1.5 years. So it looks like interest rates are going to go up again, which is bad. But what it means politically, the scam is that the attention will diverge for a while from anti-Semitism and that kind of thing, and AUKUS and these difficult situations, to management of the economy. Because you see, Jim Chalmers has been managing the Goldilocks economy, you might call it, not too hot, not too cold, for a couple of years. He's got the settings right. But now inflation, government spending, and external factors mostly, which is driving inflation, he's put the pressure on the RBA to lift interest rates again at its next meeting. So that's what the money markets are punting at the moment, a rise in interest rates. Meanwhile, Jason Gillum, the concert pianist that's in a stoush with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra over expressing his opinion on Israel. It's a contract, unfair dismissal kind of case. He had a hearing this week. We're going to do something on Jason soon because it's absolutely outrageous. He joins an increasing chorus of people in the classical music world who are up in arms about the genocide, and they're trying to lawyer him out of existence. They said that they called 20 witnesses, as if they're going to put the heavyweight directors of the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra in the dock for cross-examination by Jason's barristers, as if they're going to do that. All he has to do is hold out until he gets to court. It's just a game. That's where all the black magic happens in these legal actions, when it's who has the deeper wallet till you get to the courtroom steps.
Remarkable how the legal tactics are replicated across the English-speaking world. Is it not? I'm doing well, went through a breakup, so that sucked. Oh shit. Really? My current partner has been asking when I'm going to start doing streams again, so hopefully... Is that... I'll message you in Discord about that, if you don't mind. I don't want to pry. How am I? I'm garbage, which is standard. Does sound like an improvement. Stay entirely off social media. Ayatollah's regime is funding it. It's all terrorists. Oh, funding Upscrolled here. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, staying off social media... I don't know. I do that from time to time. But the thing is that I kind of made quite a few solid contacts through social media, so it's kind of difficult to stay off it for me. Grow a durian tree, your neighbors will love it. Dude, durian is a delicious fruit, and I will die on that hill. Cucumbers, onions, peppers, tomatoes, zucchini, squash. Okay, this is... You guys are having a nice little conversation between yourselves. That's very sweet. I like it. Am I garbage? Yeah. You'll die smelly then, thanks. We all die smelly.
So rates up. Jason Gillam's staff will do something on that soon. Great story on the website by Andrew Brown, the Bondi T-shirt guy who writes on the Herzog visit. Please read it. Beautiful piece. Lots of other great content. Steph Tran, our intrepid reporter, has been doing some great stuff on money being washed through the Australian charities sector into Israel. Probably the biggest story this week, certainly the biggest investigative story this year. She's gone in and found a number of charities where they're washing money through to West Bank settlement financing, illegal financing, through Australian charities, and also to the IDF, which of course is accused of committing war crimes for the past 2.5 years. So we're financing it. We're subsidising the financing of it via the charity system. Great work from Steph there. There's a bit happening on the ASX too, because we've got the biggest deal ever on the ASX in Australian business and finance, which is the merger of Glencore, the evil Glencore, and Rio Tinto, which will create the world's largest mining giant. And Glencore's got a lot of coal, so when they put it together under the band of, Rio Core or Glen Tinto or something, or they might just call it Rio Tinto still, because Rio's going to get control under this scrip deal, which means they exchange paper, not cash. If that happens, we're going to have the biggest deal ever, and they'll probably spin off their coal because they'll have a good Rio and a bad Rio. That makes sense. If you want to invest in coal, which is going to be very high yield until the lights go out, until the curtains are drawn on fossil fuels, the yields are going to be very high because a lot of people won't touch coal these days. Not good for their investors. So the Rio, if it happens, if this deal happens, it needs FIRB, which is Jim Chalmers' approval at the federal level, because they're both foreign-dominated companies. Well, Glencore's foreign outright. So if that happens, what's the scam here? Well, the scam will be they'll use this massive transaction. They'll get the big four in there, PwC and the boys and girls. They'll get the tax lawyers in there and they'll be looking at doing some sort of scheme to not pay any corporate income tax for as long as they possibly can, let alone royalties and other stuff. So that's what's going on now. They're scheming how to rip off the national till. They got their hoods on. We don't know who they are, but they're big four. They're working out different ways to do it. That's what will be going on the money at the moment. Reduce the leakage, as they call it in tax lawyer land, as much as possible. Elsewhere, Peter Malinauskas, the Premier of South Australia, the heretofore highly regarded Premier, who then trashed his state's most esteemed and prestigious cultural event, the Adelaide Writers' Week. Trashed it, trashed the festival. He came out this week and reiterated his position that he was not sorry he blew up South Australia's premier cultural event. No, I'm not sorry. I did the right thing, said Peter. And the good news is, for the first time in weeks, it seemed as if...
This particular issue is over Dr. Randa Abdul Fattah, there was a concerted campaign to have a deplatform from Adelaide Writers' Week, which is the main, but kind of also technically sub-event of the Adelaide Festival, which is kind of a fairly important festival on, world standards. We had like 200 or so writers who were scheduled to come and speak. Very prominent ones. They all cancelled. I mean, over 100 cancelled. Most of them the vast majority of them in solidarity with Dr. Randa Abdul Fattah's deplatforming because of her pro-Palestine stance. So it turned out that the entire Writers' Week had to be cancelled. And even some musical artists of the broader Adelaide Festival pulled out. So it's a very abrogated Adelaide Festival this year. It resulted in the resignation of most of the board. The director of Adelaide Festival is actually a Jewish anti-Zionist named Adler. Her first name escapes me at the moment, but she was forced to resign by the end of it. She staunchly opposed the board's cancellation of Dr. Randa Abdul Fattah, but was overridden. Peter Malinauskas is the Premier of South Australia, where Adelaide is. And it has transpired that he pressured the board, because they received substantial state funding. He pressured the board to cancel her personally. and is now under attack because he's a stupid piece of shit.
Rupert Murdoch, Rupert's Mob News Corp, actually
Labour,
pumping
by
out
the way.
stories blaming lefty woke writers and these people for blowing up the festival themselves, blowing up their own festival. In fact, it was Rupert, as we know, in the Israel lobby, which got to Malinowskis, and it's squarely their fault, but they've been shifting the blame ever since, and they're very sheepish about it because, you see, they hold out that they are great champions of free speech. All they are is a bunch of bullies. Now, finally, actually, just to an admin thing, Michael West Media is sponsoring the Rogue or the revamped, reborn Adelaide Writers Week in early March. So we're going to do our little bit for civic unity and cohesion and doing the good stuff in this country. We might ask Rupert to be a junior sponsor, maybe. See whether they'll come good and apologise for their dastardly, despicable behaviour in shutting down free speech for a foreign government. Maybe not. Anyway, we could be at war already by the time you see this video, but I might just say on Iran, and this is really important, this has been a massive psyop. Like the Gulf of Tonkin was in the Vietnam War, just a lie. Like the babies and incubators was in the first Gulf War, like the WMD and Saddam Hussein's human shredder were in the invasion of Iraq, like the 40 babies beheaded when Hamas invaded the music festival in Israel, the 40 babies beheaded in the mass rapes. All just lies, all just psyops to get another war going. As Julian Assange said, the point isn't having a successful war, the point is having an eternal war. The tail wagging this dog is the weapons sector, the military-industrial sector. And that's why our politicians always leave politics, giving them plenty of money and then go to work for them, as do our defence chiefs. So it's a massive psyop in Iran. They said 3,000, they said 30,000, they said had been killed, these peaceful, lovely protesters. In fact, it was a Mossad op, and probably CIA as well. And Mike Pompeo, former director of the CIA, and plenty of people in the Israeli administration told Israel media that, yes, it was Mossad behind the protests. It's not even a good secret. Like WMD was a pretty good secret for a little while. So it's a psyop. What they really want is regime change because Netanyahu's telling Trump, you've got to do this. They want to invade Iran because Iran is the only one that stands up to them. And you don't have to be a fan of the Ayatollah to take this position, no. Do you condemn Hamas? It's the same spiel. Do you condemn the Ayatollah for treating his people so badly? It was a massive psyop and it failed, but it looks as though they're still lining up. The American troop movements, aircraft carriers and so on, heading Iran's way. It looks like it's going to happen. And the guts of it is they want to control the Iran regime because the Iranians are the only ones that give them the bird. They're the only ones in the Middle East. All of the rest of them are subjects, meek subjects, and they want the oil. They want Exxon and Chevron to control Iran's oil supply and production. That's what they want. And Netanyahu and Trump also want and need a distraction because both of them are genocide financiers and perpetrators. And so that's where we're at now. Thank you for your support. Please like, share and comment in the section below. And we thank our sponsors Island Optical and Optical Superstores for their support. And we thank especially the Patreon supporters who make this production and the work, investigative work on the website, which you will have noticed over the past 6 weeks has been, low to crow, but it's been exemplary. So thanks for your support, and we'll see you on the next round.
Oh, what's up, Anova?
Scam of the week has to go to Albo. I mean, either he's so crafty and he's decided we're going to put these Zionists...
I'll answer that in a second.
...forever because they just can't get off our backs. And so he said, yeah, let Herzog in because everybody's going to hate it. And that will consolidate public opinion around the anti-genocide cause. Or more than likely, it's just a bad judgment. And what Albo's done is he's been wedged into it by the Zionist Federation. You're anti-Semitic if you don't allow this guy into the country because he's a head of state. And so therefore he wedges Sam Mostyn, the GG, Governor General, and says, Sam, you've got to invite this guy as a head of state. That's probably what happened, but who knows? It's a massive mistake. It's a massive mistake. The Chrissy Moss admins in New South Wales are going to be doing everything he can to shut down peaceful protest about this. And Jacinta Allen in Victoria's already said, oh, yes, I'm going to meet with him. Great. Is that like, you know, you guys, is Albo going to meet 3 times with Herzog, as a certain person called Neville Chamberlain did back in the day, meeting that German, that well-known historical German figure before World War II in 1938? Neville Chamberlain. Is it Neville Chamberlain Albanese? Or is he craftier than that? We call on him to just arrest this bloke. How good would that be? You'd be a hero around the world. Anyway, otherwise we just live.
That's not the. I've got to differ with the great Michael here, that equating Anthony Albanese as Neville Chamberlain meeting with Hitler in the form of Isaac Herzog. That's not at all. The fact is that the Germans from World War I were an imperial enemy from the beginning of World War II. I mean, from the beginning of not World War II, but the rise of Nazism in post-Weimar Germany was not at all from the point of view of the Allied powers as being some kind of inherent, intrinsic enmity to Nazism. That's not what they were opposed to at all. They viewed it as a rise of an imperial Germany again. That was their fundamental opposition. I mean, all this stuff was, about fighting fascists. That's very much a narrative spun, created after the fact. And I mean, I have to say that if you're from the point of view of somebody who's, outcomes matter. Sure, it was good that they fought the Nazis and that the Nazis were defeated. But the narrative is not the same thing. I mean, Israel is not a exact analog of Germany in this case. It is very much, it would be like saying that the Netherlands, like some kind of fascistic alternate universe government in the Netherlands in 1938, was somehow, I mean, they're on the same side. They're all one team. Israel is on these guys' team. It's not at all the same.
In the Vichy regime, it's as simple as that. Complete patsies, giving these guys money to control our destiny. See you on the next outing.
Okay, we're nearly done with Australian. Is there anything? Australian news? You know, look at, we've just outlawed any kind of hate speech here. Oh yeah, as for Arnaldo's question about Israelis coming here, yes, we have a lot. We have a lot of baby killers from Israel in this country. And if you protest them, if you point them out, it will be declared a anti-Semitic act, as old mate Pat Empanada is going to point out in this 7-minute video.
Citizens, were you thinking of saying something mean about Israel? Were you thinking of saying that it's bad to kill children? Were you thinking of saying that stealing other people's land is wrong? Citizen, what you've just done carries a sentence of at least 6 years in prison in Australia, because they have recently passed new hate crime legislation specifically directed at criminalizing basically anything that makes a Zionist Jew uncomfortable. So they introduced a new bill which was called the Combating Anti-Semitism, Hate and Extremism Bill. Notice the specific anti-Semitism, right? Like, it could just be combating hate and extremism, but no. Anti-Semitism is talked about as something separate, something special, something that needs to be specifically acknowledged, because Jews are, in the narrative of Western imperialism, by the necessity of Western imperialism to uphold the state of Israel, a special class of person above all others, who need special laws and protections that are not afforded to other people. This thus justifies speech that obviously would never be considered.
Only if you're the right kind, though. If you're not the right kind, then You know, news articles where they'll always point out if somebody from the Zionist point of view is being criticized or attacked, they'll always point out if that person is Jewish. There'll always be you'll always have it appended that this is a Jewish person who's being attacked. However, if in the case of Louise Adler, who's an anti-Zionist Jew, you always find in those very same articles, mysteriously, the fact that she's Jewish is not pointed out. So you are systematically, I mean, you all know this, but it's still quite a thing to see. Like watching a murder unfolding in front of you. It's quite a thing to see Jewishness stripped from certain kinds of people, if you're not the right kind of person, right out there, and nothing is said about it. It is completely acceptable in society. I mean, most of the fucking morons who read the mainstream papers in this country won't even notice that. Like that thought will never enter into their heads, and thus the narrative is spun. You all know how it goes.
Considered wrong in a similar analogous context, being considered literally criminal in the context of like it being against Israel, because Israel is Jewish. Jews are so special that they warrant special mention, even in a supposed general law against like hate and extremism. So you better not say anything mean about Israel, citizen. And this bill was so rapidly written and passed, it took like a week or two. Like, it passed both the House and the Senate on the same day, the 20th of January, rapidly pushed through. So there was a request from one senator to make amendments to this bill that would exclude from it criticism of the practices, policies, and acts of the State of Israel, the Israeli Defense Forces, or Zionism. And it was rejected by 43-12, with the major parties opposing it. So they explicitly rejected there being any sort of exemption that would make it clear that you can't be jailed for years simply for making someone feel uncomfortable because you criticize Israel. Amazing. So one of the key parts of this new law is this redefinition of hate crime into conduct that would cause a reasonable person who is the target or a member of the target group to be intimidated or fear harassment or violence or to fear for their safety. So obviously the reason why this is included in here is so that random Jewish Zionists can claim that criticism of Israel, of Zionism, of mass murder of children for Jewish supremacist colonialism is causing them to be fearful or to be intimidated or to fear for their safety. It also gives the government new powers to designate what it calls hate groups with no oversight whatsoever. It's only under the discretion of the government. So the police minister is going to be able to designate on his sole discretion any group a banned hate group. Or he just has to be satisfied that the organization has engaged in, prepared to engage in, or assisted in the engagement of conduct constituting a hate crime. That is what we just went over, like saying something that causes a Jewish person to feel fear or intimidation, which, as we all know, that even includes like criticizing Benjamin fucking Netanyahu. Like, as we've seen recently, there was a guy in Australia who was arrested for wearing a Fuck Israel t-shirt. A person does not need to have been convicted of a hate crime in order for the minister to be satisfied that an organization...
He's just gonna catch up on chat. As far as it scrolled up anyway. The Ayatollah is not the one who makes the decisions in the USA. Is out of contract. I mean, I don't think he makes day-to-day decisions, but the Ayatollah is ultimately the final arbiter of most decisions made. It might interest you to know that at the moment, in the Iranian parliament, there are quite a few liberals. Like, the liberals have a strong presence there, and I think at the moment, like, I think the president, what is his name? Forgot his name. It sounds kind of Armenian, which wouldn't be too unusual, considering that there's an Armenian presence in Iran. they have quite a strong presence in Parliament, and I would personally, and we can debate about this later, but I do think that Iran's apparent relative weakness compared to previous years, when it should be stronger militarily and in terms of its foreign policy, I would lay that at the feet of the liberals here, who still view themselves, their culture, as potentially salvageable as a Western culture. It's kind of a brain disease amongst, you'll see it in the Iranian diaspora. This is why the response to Israel bombing them that first time around was seen as, I don't know what word to use here, a little bit deficient, like a little bit restrained, and why it has been restrained going forward. And I think that, Khamenei being the final arbiter of all these decisions, I think he has acquiesced to this point of view to some extent. So, I mean, once again, it demonstrates the reasonableness of the Iranian regime, that scary word, regime, when used for enemies. The reasonableness, the rationality of it is on full display here, much to Iran's detriment, actually. Sweden, you are not legally allowed to call a pig a pig. Israel is worse than Nazi Germany. I think it is. I think that there is a strong argument to be made that Israel is actually worse than Nazi Germany. Because, I mean, for reasons that you've probably, you've concluded yourselves, that back then there wasn't the permeation of real-time acts of genocide as there are today. I don't think that there were many Germans, ordinary Germans, as much as we'd like to point out that actually probably more Germans knew about what was going on than we think. I do still think that I don't think it was reaching numbers like 87%. Like, who were basically saying, yes, we should kill more children. It's unfortunate that they have to die, but, they're all future terrorists. Ranging from that at the mild end to, at the extreme end, just kill them all because they're animals. And certainly nothing like people live streaming, wearing women's clothing and, raping inmates to Timan. I mean, the list goes on. You all know what it is. I do think that there is a case to be made that Israel is worse than Nazi Germany. Not in terms of volume, but certainly in terms of motivation and just the sheer glee and hatred. And, reveling in the destruction and death that they're causing, I think it's probably unmatched in history. I think maybe the closest that comes to it was the people who participated in the Rwanda genocide. Says, welcome in, Social Democracy 14. Says, in some countries is getting crazy. Yes. Can you call him Jack Boost there in a derogatory way? Police are a special minority in the FFEs need to be respected. Yeah, local factions. Be a credit. Be more free than.
Has engaged in kind of conduct mentioned in the previous paragraph. So they don't even need like a conviction, right? Even under their ridiculous laws, they can just ban an organization wholesale and then criminalize anyone who they claim is still a member of it. This is so blatantly and plainly designed to criminalize being against Israel, obviously. And if you are a member of one of these groups that they have decided are a prohibited group arbitrarily, something that, as I said, the minister can just decide based on his sole discretion. No oversight whatsoever. No need to prove it in court or anything. If you're a member of that group, the penalty is imprisonment for 7 years. I'm not kidding. If you're the leader of one of these groups or a leader of them, you go to jail for 10 years. If you recruit for these arbitrarily declared hate groups, you're in prison for 15 years as well. You literally, like, you don't even have to commit a crime. There doesn't
Yeah. This is kind of hits home when he puts it in these terms, because I'm a member of Earth Friends of Palestine. So fuck knows how I can be RICO'd in. And the fact that I'm Egyptian, well, I have terrorism in the blood.
have to be a single proven crime committed by any of these declared hate groups. You just go to fucking jail, basically, because the minister decided they should be banned. Funding, like, these sentences are insane. 7 years minimum, they go up to 15 years for basically anything related to one of these supposed groups. So yeah, like, people are like, why don't you live in Australia? Why would I want to live in Australia? If I was living in Australia, I'd be in the slam of 15 fucking years. Like, every time I go to that shithole of a country, I have to, like, not post a single thing or I'll get arrested. Like, straight up. If you're in Australia and you post on the internet saying, like, gee whiz, I sure don't like that Benjamin Netanyahu person. If, like, some random Jewish Zionist reports you to the cops, you're running the risk of 15 years in the slam, or I'll have you know. Like, literally, even legal experts are saying that criticism of Israel...
That might sound kind of hyperbolic, but when these laws were brought, when they were passed, I am now self-censoring on Twitter, because I don't want to have a knock at the door.
Or the country's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may be offensive if they are said to cause psychological harm and prompt warnings to the government from intelligence agencies. Unfucking believable. We live in a joke of a world. I don't understand. People see the ridiculous bending over backwards that every single Western government is doing to protect Israeli genocide. Like, how would you see this as a remotely reasonable person who isn't, like, knowledgeable about politics or something, everyone who thinks about politics? How would you see this sort of thing happening in every single Western country and not be like, oh my god, I'm occupied by the Zionists? It just makes, like, intuitive sense at first look. They just keep doing ludicrous, ridiculous shit that, if anything, is gonna make people supposedly anti-Semitic, and then I guess they'll use that fact to throw them in prison. So I guess that's the plan.
Okay, fun bit. Most of you are probably not in here for anything fun. But I'm gonna force feed this shit to you. If you haven't seen Andor, do watch it. Great piece of media made in last, I don't know, probably, I don't know. I don't think there's anything, not much is better than this series. So we're going to go through exactly how, by the way, our queen, who plays a villain role in this TV show. I'm a Star Wars nerd, by the way. I love Star Wars. Always have. It's got me through some difficult times. And I do all the stuff. I've played most of the games. I play the tabletop wargaming version of it, the Star Wars Legion. You look closely when I'm not on GIF, when I'm not GIF tubing, you'll see the boxes of shit behind me. I paint and assemble miniatures, and I go out to the local club and we roll dice and kill each other on the field. I'm that much of a nerd. So I was very happy when Andor came out, by far, by head and shoulders and full body, the best piece of Star Wars media that's come out since the Disney, well, since anything, to be honest. It's about Revolution, the first season, I would say, as a whole. Provides an allegory of labor rights under an encroaching fascistic regime. Second season, I think is mostly, everybody will have their own interpretation about the second season, but I tend to think that it's a wake-up call if you are informed in any way through art about what a actual revolution will look like, and sacrifices that need to be made, and the fact that, you know, it's a little bit dirty. You cannot be morally clean if anything like this is to succeed. No socialist government has ever come into power in history without quite a lot of misery, essentially. And I guess it's up to the individual to make those calculations for themselves. I mean, if you are somebody who says nobody should die, nobody should suffer, then by all means, acquiesce to the system that we're facing. Do not resist. And I'm taking a shortcut through the dialectics there, but I mean, that is the ultimate answer. Do not resist. Go along with it, even if that means your own immediate situation is vastly undermined. Do not resist. You know.
We live in a fallen world. The true state of human civilization should be to live communally as
like
one.
Jawas,
But
nice.
instead we are alienated.
Stop the fun, Kairos.
individuals, constantly competing one against the other for our own egotistical advantage. How could we live in a better world? Well, the answer must be through glorious revolution to work our way back to the communist utopia. This is the central ideology of Marxism.
By the way, I was going to say that, yeah, our queen here, Denise Goff, who plays Irish actress, I cannot speak, had a bit of wine after my pasta, I'm not ashamed to admit it, is an outspoken anti-genocide activist. She's been interviewed on Zeteo Media and other outlets, I believe. Feel free to Google those. I love her. And I believe that really most of the actors in here, at least tacitly pro-Palestine, including Diego Luna and Stellan Skarsgård.
The ideology of Karl Marx, which
It's safe, is what I'm trying to say.
I have seen expressed in many places, many works of political philosophy and works of art and storytelling. But the one place I didn't expect to find Marxist ideology was in a streaming television show from the uber-capitalist Disney Corporation.
To steal from the Empire?
Andor, a Star Wars story, has proven to be something of a slow burn mega hit over the last few months, as audiences who were burned out from one attempt to exploit the Star Wars franchise as streaming television shows.
You're a regional champ at Star Wars hating, and you're as beautiful and important? Okay. Win.
Disney Plus platform after another slowly came back to what has proven to be by far the best produced and best written of all of Disney's attempts to make Star Wars for contemporary audiences. The surprising thing about the new fandom for Andor, perhaps, are those people who have condemned Disney's attempts to exploit the Star Wars franchise as woke garbage. Because Andor is by far the most woke Star Wars television show so far, and arguably the most woke Star Wars television show that it would be possible to make, because it is, quite literally, a Marxist allegory.
So fat and satisfied.
For the people saying, oh, I don't see anything woke about Andor, I really like that show and I hate wokeness, we're going to go through step by step in an analysis how Andor illustrates Marxist ideology. Warning, this is not a moral or ethical evaluation of the ideological structures of Marxism. This is a critical assessment of Marxist messaging in And/or A Star Wars Story. But at the conclusion of this assessment, we will investigate why haters of Marxism may find meaning or even pleasure in And/or A Star Wars Story. But before we get there, I have to explain to you why I hate Bertolt Brecht.
East Berlin, the final resting place of Bertolt, essayist, poet, and playwright. His theory of the epic theater was to revolutionize dramatic practice in our century.
I'm one of those people who, perhaps foolishly, has dedicated my entire professional life and my studies to the understanding of storytelling in all of its forms. And when I was in sixth form, which I believe is high school to the American viewers out there, I was particularly interested in studying theatre, and I was made to study the works of interwar German playwright Bertolt Brecht, which I really disliked at the time for two reasons. The more important of those reasons was that Bertolt Brecht is, or was, a Marxist. And I really objected to the Marxist ideas because at the time I didn't understand how they applied to me at all. I also disliked Bertolt Brecht because of his idea of Verfremdungseffekt, which translates roughly as the alienation effect, which he sought in his work. As a Marxist,
You know, I gotta say that as much as I am very suspicious of Germans, I hold quite a bit of animosity towards Germania in general. You know, big ups to their endless compound words. Just mash any number of words together and you've got a German word. It's no wonder they have so many good words for things. They just throw the shit together.
playwright, Brecht was trying to awaken people to the realities of social injustice through his plays like The Caucasian Chalk Circle or The Resistible Rise of Arturo Ui. And
I'd like to say that reading The Caucasian Chalk Circle in high school literature was a fucking nightmare. I hated every second of that. Hedda Gabler was more interesting to me.
Brecht developed a set of principles for doing this that he called epic theatre, or later dialectical theatre. And Verfremdungseffekt, which I struggled to pronounce just then and couldn't pronounce at all as a teenager, which is the reason I disliked Bertolt Brecht, was one of the ways of doing this, to alienate the audience from being immersed in the story by doing things like stopping the drama and having characters make epic political speeches.
There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. The Empire is a disease that thrives in darkness. It is never more alive than when we sleep.
Or sowing extracts from political manifestos through the drama.
There will be times when the struggle seems impossible. Remember this. Freedom is a pure idea. Random acts of insurrection are occurring constantly throughout the galaxy. Remember that the frontier of the rebellion is everywhere. And even the smallest act of insurrection pushes our lines forward.
And I would suggest to you that Tony Gilroy and the team behind And/or A Star Wars Story are using the effects of Verfremdungseffekt to achieve epic theatre in the epic storytelling of Star Wars And/or. Tony Gilroy is a major Hollywood movie director, even more so now with the success of And/or. And he has in interviews said that he didn't intend for And/or
100% love their
to
language,
be
yeah.
political. He's also said that one of the major characters in And/or was based on the historical actions of Joseph Stalin. This is a bit like saying you come in peace whilst packing an AR-15.
So one of the things that they did in the first season was they were basically embarking upon a heist, and this formed part of Cassian Andor's little political awakening, where he was essentially a mercenary brought on for his expertise to assist this group of rebels who were doing it for the purposes of obtaining funding for the rebellion. And there was another content creator on YouTube named Artor, who we watched on another stream, who quite cleverly and I think accurately pointed out that this is very similar to a heist that the early Russian socialist, which included I don't remember what his real name is, but you know, Joseph Stalin also embarked upon in his younger days. Stalin was quite a brave dude, actually. No matter what else you might say of him, he's a witty writer. If you've ever read his essays, witty and incisive writer. He was a thinker, even though he's been kind of portrayed as kind of a dumb guy, just a dumb paranoid brute. But he's actually quite a smart guy, and quite a brave dude. Apparently, he's never shied away from the front lines, which kind of reminds me oddly of Saddam Hussein, who wasn't much of a thinker, but certainly was brave. Like, he did some Rambo shit in his younger days.
So let us together follow the journey of Cassian Andor from his childhood to his awakening to the truths of class consciousness and social injustice. A journey that he begins among the native tribespeople of the planet Canary, who in Marxist ideology represent the primitive. This word isn't used pejoratively by Marxists. It's used rather to suggest something more like the primary, that the basic state of...
Yeah, Djukasvili is the name I was thinking of. It's kind of an archetypal Georgian name.
Humanity is to live in peace, in cooperation, in...
Oh wait, I just realized Djukasvilin. Okay, I get it now. Well done, well played.
Community together as one. Then the young Cassian's life is destroyed by the arrival of industry, capitalism.
Top points.
The processes
Top points to that fellow.
of material production that will destroy the primary model of human life and instead transform us into a capitalist society, which in Star Wars Andor arrives in the form of an imperial mining disaster which disturbs the peace of the world of Canary, where we can see that the empire that arises in Andor isn't much different from the republic that came before it. They are both essentially capitalist in structure, but one has done the inevitable thing, which in Marxist theory, capitalism will always do. Because capitalism is an artificial construct enforcing itself upon the more natural communist forms of human life, it must be enforced with increasing levels of violence, intimidation, political oppression. And this is wielded most commonly in capitalist society, not through military force, which is too disruptive, but through intelligence services, which in Star Wars Andor are represented by the Imperial Security Bureau, the ISB, all of the members of which...
Can I just say that I can just imagine that Kairos is getting very infuriated right now? Because there's no way for him to immediately reply to what you're saying. And it's just going to be this this spectrum-based, like, word. Like, like, exactly what words mean and shit. I'm just gonna leave it. I'm not gonna comment any more than that.
Are, of course, well-spoken British colonialists. And the model for capitalist imperialist colonialism throughout Andor and much of the Star Wars franchise is the model that was enforced on much of the world by the British Empire through the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. The young Cassian is rescued by Marva and Clem Andor, from which he gets the name Cassian Andor, which represents the two parts of the human that has been sucked into the fallen capitalist power structure, the true human, who is Cassian, and the alienated adult, who is Andor. And what we follow in Andor, A Star Wars Story, is the journey of the alienated adult human being. It's symbolically significant that Andor is searching for his lost sister. In psychoanalytic interpretations of Marxist ideology, from figures like Sigmund Freud, that search for a pure
The juice is not worth the squeeze.
A pure self, often of opposite gender. For a man, it would be a perfect idealized female, like a missing sister, is symbolic of the search for the self that we have lost as we are alienated in capitalist society. Cassian Andor then grows up in the proletariat mass, the people of
like the
Ferrix, which is a hyper-capitalist planet world entirely concerned with various forms of production that the proletariat perform, but they don't profit from. They make everything from bricks to starships, and Ferrix is a massive trading center for all of the various capitalist goods produced around the galaxy. But the profits are all extracted away from the proletariat. Ultimately, the capitalist power systems will seek to take away everything from the proletariat in their growing quest to exert more power and control over the systems of production. Those means of production are owned by the bourgeoisie, the small minority of society who receive all of the excess wealth from their ownership of the means of production. We see the bourgeoisie in Andor in two forms. One is the world of Coruscant and the character of Mon Mothma and the family and colleagues around her, who are all the most powerful top tier of the bourgeoisie. Mon Mothma has been born into great wealth, but she doesn't get to control that wealth. And this is quite pivotal, that whilst the bourgeoisie may be individually powerful to an extent, they are embedded as much as anyone else within systems of power. And it's the growing awareness of their own powerlessness that leads the bourgeoisie to forms of rebellion and revolution. The second form in Andor Star Wars Story is the petty bourgeoisie, who are of much lower rank and little to no influence, but who have some kind of salaried position in the power structures of capitalist society. Much like Cyril Khan, who begins as a police inspector and
a link to it, sure,
that position, but is constantly struggling to regain some form of position.
I should probably have
in
posted a link
society.
anyway.
And the petty bourgeoisie are
I forget
kept
this
in
shit.
place by this struggle to become members of the true elite, the higher levels of the bourgeoisie. That awareness of their individual powerlessness in the face of the structural injustices within their society leads a small number of the bourgeoisie to become bourgeois revolutionaries. Within Marxist theory, it's commonly believed that the revolution must be led by members of the privileged elite because they are the only individuals who have the freedom of action to actually begin to disrupt the capitalist power structures at great cost, because the bourgeois revolutionary is generally believed to be acting selfishly for their own egotistical interests. And so they are seen by the revolution not just as expendable, but they will probably have to be sacrificed. They won't be allowed to join the final communist utopia. While the true leaders of the revolution, the rebel alliance, you may wish to call it, are the Leninist vanguard. Lenin was the first true communist or Marxist world leader who practiced a very particular form of Marxism called Leninism, which was distinguished by its belief that it must be led by its own elite, an intellectual vanguard who had the unique levels of education and personal insight to both incite and lead the revolution. This vanguard are represented in Andor by Luthen Ryle, because whilst Luthen Ryle practices a Leninist vanguardism, he is also a Stalinist accelerationist. Stalin's contribution to Marxist theory was the idea that you would have to accelerate the evils of capitalism through acts of criminality or terrorism or the incitement of wars or other form of violence, to accelerate capitalism to its peak of violence, in fact, to the pinnacle of fascism, so that the people would rise up against it, which is...
So I'm just going to point out here that there are two kind of... Well, really, the Stalinist accelerationism is, I think, what most people view as accelerationism when you use that term these days. That is allowing capital to enact its greatest excesses amongst the population in order to precipitate mass uprisings, right? That's what most people view as accelerationism. But however, the term accelerationism is originally it came about through it was first posited by pseudo-leftist thinkers. I call them pseudo-left because I think they regarded themselves as being sort of more Marxist thinkers, like Deleuze, who viewed accelerationism as being allowing society to progress to a point of technological, like sort of both technological and technocratic, which are two distinct things, through that period whereby capital's own contradictions will be overcome by just the fact that, you know, the singularity will be achieved and there'll be nothing left for anyone to do, and you'll be left with a sort of a kind of socialist utopia as you see depicted in works of such writers as Ian M. Banks, The Culture, whereby we all live in technological harmony with AI who exist to help us. They think we're very stupid. Incidentally, in Ian M. Banks's world, but they still... for some reason, and I'm not going to go into the philosophical aspects of this because I don't really know or give a shit myself, but apparently they've come to the conclusion that the best way to conduct themselves is to perpetuate life, and that is to help humans and other beings within their culture to live in harmony and with, the least amount of pain, and living for happiness, essentially, to maximize happiness. That's where the term accelerationism actually comes from. But most people don't know about that thread of thought. Most people think of Stalinist accelerationism. And I've got to tell you that while while there are obviously moral qualms with which one might have, including me, with there is a point to be made that most people in the West, regardless of the suffering of 80% of the world, just have far too much to lose. And we're only seeing now in countries like the United States where they're coming into your neighborhoods and killing white people that opposition is raised. So, there might be something in that, I may suggest.
It's exactly Luf and Rahl's strategy in Andor. This Stalinist accelerationism leads most forms of Marxism to an embrace of criminal enterprise. Within Marxist ideology, the underclass of society are seen to be forced into criminality. Therefore, the Marxist is willing to embrace both criminals because they're seen as
Stalinism doesn't really exist. Well, yeah.
Representatives of the proletariat and acts of criminality.
I guess if one was this is Kairos doing his exact meaning thing again. I guess if one were to say, communism as enacted by Stalin, his own personal philosophy, if not exactly codified and written.
So the robbery, the heist, which is the central caper at the heart of Andor Star Wars story, is based on a set of historical events like the 1907 Tiflis bank robbery, which was conducted by senior members of the Russian Communist.
Yes, that's correct. So it does not constitute a strict analytic framework. There was no interpretation of socialism put forward by Stalin in any codified sense. He did write his views on how to run a socialist country, but those were just his own thoughts. A lot of them very funny, by the way.
Including Lenin and Stalin and many others. You can ignore politics, but politics will not ignore you. A famous quotation from the Greek statesman Pericles, often quoted by the Marxist leader of the Communist Party of China, Mao Zedong. In Marxist ideology, individuals who choose not to participate in the revolution are equally implicated within the power structures and social injustices of capitalism. This is the situation that Cassian Andor finds himself in. He has rejected his call to participation in the revolution. He is deliberately remaining ignorant of the truths of social injustice and the reality of class consciousness. And he chooses instead to escape. This is the common act of individuals who have semi-awakened to the injustices of society. You can no longer participate in the proletariat. So instead, you choose to escape, to make some money any way you can and go and live on a beach, a pleasure island somewhere. And this typically leads the alienated individual like Cassian Andor to fall into the lumpen proletariat, because the easiest way to make those sums of money once you're alienated from the proletariat is acts of criminality. The lumpen proletariat are the very bottom layer, the underclass of a society, often considered to be criminal in their activities. Thieves, prostitutes, gangsters, drug dealers, many other forms of individual who are unable to participate fully in the productive proletariat. And there is a debate within Marxism about whether the lumpen proletariat can be made part of the revolution. Capitalism, however, knows how to make use of the lumpen proletariat. The postmodern and Marxist philosopher Michel Foucault outlined this in his 1975 book, Discipline and Punishment, The Birth of the Prison, where he shows that the prison system is in fact not so much about punishing or controlling criminality as it is about taking the lumpen proletariat and through torture, discipline, punishment, and imprisonment, making them an effective workforce. Exactly what we see on Narkina 5, the ultimate disciplinarian prison with a system of punishment that compels the lumpen proletariat individuals imprisoned there to continual productivity. But if the lumpen proletariat can rise up against the systems of punishment and imprisonment within which they are trapped.
You play against all the other tables in this room. I play against all the other rooms.
Please. I absolutely adore Andy Serkis's performance as the everyman who believes the story he has been given, that he will one day be released from his continual punishment and allowed to pursue productivity for his own profit instead of for the capitalist system and the profits of the bourgeoisie. And his...
One might call him the labor aristocracy.
Awakening to the fact that he will
Andy Serkis's character
never be released and must instead join the revolutionary spirit. Marxist ideology believes that the revolution does not arise from any single individual. Instead, it comes from the revolutionary spirit, the accumulation of acts of oppression by the capitalist system upon the individual, who then rise up to reform their communal living structures. And what do we have at the climax of Andor but the literal spirit of the proletariat calling them to participate in the revolution? Never has a clearer symbol of Marxist ideology been put on screen by the Disney Corporation. So why do so many of the usual suspects who are perpetually angered by woke ideology somehow enjoy the Marxist allegory of Andor, a Star Wars story following a protagonist of color from a native peoples on his journey of personal awakening to the systematic social injustices of society and to his own class consciousness? I think it's because there's a deep truth in the story. Our human society is systematically unjust to many, many of its members. And there are, I think, three responses to the understanding of that injustice. One of them is the response of the original Star Wars movies, which is the mythic or the fantasy response, which is that I will become a hero and I will rescue Princess Leia and I will destroy the Death Star, the ultimate symbol of oppressive power in the galaxy. But this is a response that can only really be believed by children. The adult understanding of that same response is what we see in Andor's Star Wars story, which is that, yes, you and many other thousands, millions of individuals will make personal acts of rebellion against oppressive power that will be at great cost. You will have your own awakening, but you may become lost in nihilistic escapism along the way. You may fall into the lumpen proletariat. This is the adult story. This is the true cost of fighting against oppressive power. But there is a third response, and this is the response of the fascists, a response that we see growing again in our society today as the inequalities and the structural injustices grow, which is the response that I see now that there are injustices in our society, so my group must win. And this ultimately...
Can I just say that this point here is crucial? And probably it's not relevant to people who are in this stream, but I see this quite a lot in kind of broadly, very well-meaning people who I believe are genuine. In other leftist streams, leftist media, on Twitch, on YouTube, that, I mean, ultimately, if you, going past the theory, you want to achieve the world that you... Do you ultimately believe, do you ultimately think that you are correct? And it's great to have a bit of self-doubt. We must all check ourselves. But at the end of the day, do we believe that we are correct and the other guys are not? And if you have the courage of your convictions and you think that you are correct, do you think that you should win? And the next question is, what are you willing to do to win? Is winning important to you at all? So, to create the world that you want to live in, what are you going to do to achieve that? And I think it's a question that each individually we all have to, and no passing judgment on whatever conclusions each individual arrives at. You have to wrestle with that equation. And a lot of this, I think, it demonstrates how the rebels, what they had to do, the atrocities they had to commit, the sacrifices they had to make in order to win, I think is a signal lesson for the broad left to come to terms with. Because I'm going to tell you that the right-wing conservatives, they've long ago come to that conclusion. They're not at all shy to go with their beliefs alone, without much evidence. And they're willing to do a lot to force those beliefs on other people. And yes, we may have to force our beliefs on other people who don't agree with us. That's just simply the facts.
leads those people who make that choice on the path through authoritarianism to totalitarianism and then to true fascism. I hope you choose not to make that third response. I hope we recognize that we can't make the first response, the childish fantasy response, and that we are all invested with the complex decisions to resist oppression wherever we find it. That doesn't mean we're all going to become Marxists. Marxism is a 150-year-old critique of the oppressive power structures of society. It doesn't mean we're all going to reject capitalism. That is a critique that lacks the true complexity that we need today. What it means is that we must all recognize the personal costs that will be inescapable if we are to maintain our freedoms. There's so much more to be said about this. Here on the Science Fiction YouTube channel, we make the pop critiques. So if you want to go deeper into this understanding of science fiction and fantasy storytelling, hop over to
all right, catch you later, Jug.
.com/podcast and
Yeah, guys,
subscribe to the Science Fiction Podcast. Currently on season
oh, there's a conversation to be had
break,
about that too, but
1 or 2
we'll leave that for another time.
critiques of sci-fi and fantasy storytelling, their political relevance to our contemporary
an important
civilization and society.
Sure, yes. That's exactly right, yes. I mean, a lot of that is addressed in the show as well. That's it outright states that what a lot of the characters are fighting for, they will not see in their lifetimes.
Subscribe. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Okay, well, that does it for me. It's 11 p.m. How many people are in here? 9? Okay. I'm gonna raid Lesbian Hot Sauce. Thank you all for being here for me, a balmy Sunday evening. Hope you enjoyed, or at least were mildly diverted by me showing stuff that other people have put in a lot of hard work to create and then commenting on it a little bit, while I myself am not even on screen. So, you know, with that said, enjoy Lesbian Hot Sauce. Lovely, lovely streamer. My big sister, even though she's younger than me. So, wherever you are in the world, good night and good luck. See you later, Ronaldo.
Crabs. Would anyone ideas with mental health and being queer in your 20s? Ooh, that sounds like my 20s. Mental health.